Let's take a look at how we could approach trying to resurface this three-dimensional model. Now this object is very organic, so it's very round, which means there are no hard edges, so I can't really work with lines or key point curves. However, we know the front will be linear because the blade will stick out. And also, we can see there's a crease going along this line, going to here. If we rotate the model, think about you would build this whole model out of foam, and then you take a knife and this linear surface you just cut off. So that, for example, gives you already a good idea how we could build this one. So I'm going to ignore this crease. I'm going to build this outside profile, this inside profile, and then actually I'm creating a nice curve that follows this way, and one more time this way, and I loft between them, so I'm basically describing the surface, and then I'm going to trim everything. Okay, so let's get started. Let's maybe make this one a degree 5. Now my first step is basically to figure out which points, not which points, where do I need my points. Now one thing you have to get used to is when you make a foam model, it looks really nice. Forget about trying to replicate this foam model digitally one-to-one. Because the way how you can actually carve foam with a knife is different in terms of detail level compared to how you could create a surface with NURBS. The advantage of foam cutting is you have really nice details. The disadvantage is you can have also really crooked shapes. The advantage of NURBS, as you can see here, this is a really nice and smooth curve, only a degree 5. I don't necessarily can capture all mini details, but in general, later when I use this one for a surface, it's a good quality. Okay, I'm going to create a degree 1, snap to the curve, drag this one down, maybe to here, because this should be the lower end. And I'm creating another curve, and now I try to visualize how this curve, for example, could flow. So this might be there. Later I have to do a little bit of trickery. Okay, so let's go back and degree 5. And maybe I start somewhere here. Click, click. Now this part is going to be a little bit more difficult. Okay, so I put down my basic curves. Maybe let's go to shaded and wireframe. So I just only see my sketch. Then I can see how maybe through a push and pull and where all these points are positioned, I could maybe try to quickly retrace the shape I have. And there as it looks, I'm starting to run into probably an issue. No, actually I'm getting close. Oh, this is actually nice. So the same degree on the upper and the lower profile. There. Okay. So that's not too bad. You see, I used those lines, those vertical lines, simply as helpers. Actually, I would like to clean up this design and move those lines onto a new layer. Assign. Okay. Now at least I have that part done. My next step is to figure out now how can I continue and create curves so to describe this geometry. That's going to be now where I have to start to experiment. And also from the top one, I would like to have kind of like half profiles that describe the shape. And then when I loft everything, or maybe I use the bi-rail, I don't necessarily know. And specifically when you're new to this, there are always many ways or many streets that lead to Rome. The same also in CAD. Essentially, the rail, the square, the skin, the revolve, they all generate the same four-sided surface afterwards. But the difficulty is always I have to create profiles and then I force a surface through it. And sometimes certain tools just will perform better with certain, how could I say that, layouts for curves. And that's just a tricky part to figure out. And the only way to really get good at it is simply to experiment, because every model can be different. So you never really know. So let's go ahead and I'm changing this one to a degree 3. I'm going to start with the back. So I snap to the curve, middle mouse button, draft a line out, right mouse button, draft the line straight down, and then Control Alt, snap on this curve to the end. Good. And oh, that's actually degree 3. So undo, undo. 1, 2, and then there. So I have one extra point actually I can work with. This CV actually for the moment, maybe I simply move down and then Control snap to this point. So I have this height. Now you see actually from a straight back view, I can start rearranging maybe the position of those lines, and I'm using the dedicated, how could I say that, move directions for along only the X or Y axis or so. And I try to eyeball where those points have to be. I don't necessarily know right now where they should be. And this is bad. Degree 1. Sorry, 4 degree single span. That's what I want. Okay, let's see if these points, yep, they're all maintained perpendicular to the construction plane. Okay, so the reason why this was very important to have those 2 points parallel and the same with those 2 points is that when we create and turn on the symmetry, let's rotate, you really see this is a nice fluid shape. So I will not have a break. There's a breakdown here, of course, in the full model, but that's later generated by the surface we're using to cut. So for the moment, we can ignore this one. Now let's maybe take a look at how this, for example, would look like when we create a railed surface. So I have one generation curve, this one, and 2 rails. So generation, 1 rail, 2nd rail, and let's take a look. Actually, it doesn't look too bad, but if we go into our top view and we actually quickly see that our surface is not really equal the foam model. So that means we need more cross sections. So I'm going to select the surface, delete it, and then um, I do this. Going to EP, degree 3. Click maybe on the middle, snap to the middle. Okay, CV. Oh, shoot. I want to take degree 4, accept, good. And for example, now those CVs, I along the y-axis move out. And there, for example, I can see how far, for example, this point has to move out, has to be moved out to the left side till it starts hitting my digitize scan. And then this part, for example, I would like to line up with this height. So move along the x-axis, control snap. And you see it slightly moved to the left because I just went straight up. So middle mouse button and from a side view, control there. So I do the same here. Whoops. Middle mouse button, no, right, control along the z-axis, middle mouse button, control along the x-axis. Okay. Now let's go back to Rail and take a look what we have. 1, 2, spacebar, 1 and 2. Of course, it only creates it between those two generation curves. But you can see actually that the surface is close to the foam model. So we need something here at the end. So this curve for the moment I'm going to hide. And then EP, I don't have a degree 4, so I can do that afterwards. Control Alt, snap to the end of a line. There, and then we just make it a degree 4. Accept. Okay. Select those CVs, move, and for example, wrong direction, move them out. Side view, right mouse button control, middle mouse button control, same here, right mouse button control, middle mouse button control. Okay, so you see now this starts to look somewhat interesting. So let's see how this, for example, could work. So now I have more than 3 profile curves. And you see I get a position failed. Now let's redo this one because I didn't pay attention to the error mode. Yeah. Okay, so Rail 2. If we click on rebuild, it starts to work. Now, why does this one work and this one doesn't work? The whole point is that maybe the amount of, how could I say that? Think about the math, what the software has to do. And it's currently too complicated for it to really be able to recreate the surface the way you want. So by, for example, turning rebuild on, I actually allow a surface to be created and then rebuilt. So you see, for example, I have 22 spans, 27 spans, which is not really super ideal. So I have to kind of like for this moment, maybe because this is a quick model, simply accept this kind of bad result, because I'm still in the process of trying to figure out what's going to be the best way to build it. And because you also see actually anyway that my surface is actually not really following my design. And for example, here you see it pitches in, and then here it doesn't bend out enough. So this surface we delete. This doesn't work yet. Oops. There. Okay, let's maybe think about, well, what happens if we do something like this? So this is maybe where an EP curve can come in quite handy. So I snap onto those lines. And there. Okay. And let's go into CV. Actually, what I just said, where the EP curve can come in handy, that was complete rubbish, because I realized that by adjusting the edit points now, sorry, the control vertices, the whole model is going to be changed anyway. So let's go into top view, move this one in, and I try to sculpt kind of like a side profile, as you can see, matching this part. This one maybe I should go in a little bit more. Okay. So this one is degree 5, one span. Then actually in this case, this one here, degree 5, one span, except, let's see what the result is. Not really ideal. This CV is kind of wicked, so push it back down a little bit. So now, I mentioned also before, foam models are really nice, but foam models you carve by hand are very, very inaccurate. So now I have to decide what I'm going to do. Do I try to follow the foam model? But for example, here I see there's some inaccuracies in the surfaces. So for example, what I'm rather going to do is control snap all those points together, so to make sure that they are at least a little bit accurate. So the surface this curve is generating doesn't have any uneven parts in it. Okay, the end points are still the same. So let's go back to the rail command, and now two rails. So the front and the back are now my rails, and those three curves in between are my generation curves. Spacebar, 1 and 1. And you see actually this one fits the design actually quite good. Just down here something doesn't really work perfectly. Check continuity. Yeah, and so along Gen 1 and Gen 3, let's see if I can turn this one off for a moment. Yeah, it's okay. Now I get some failed complaints. Okay, just ignore that for a second, because what I'm curious is if for Gen 1 and Gen 3, if I set this one for the moment maybe to implied tangent, if I can force the surface somewhat into the shape I need. And I'm actually pretty as it looks, I'm pretty close. This opening, for example, is too big. But yeah, now if I go to the back view, there you see this is now not really ideal. So I go back to positional. So nope, didn't really work. However, this is actually not necessarily that much better. So what I'm going to do in this case is I have still a pretty simple mesh, as you can see. So it is degree 5 to span, degree 4 to span, degree 5 here. So what I rather maybe could do is the following. So I accept this result, new layer, assign it to there. Here, this actually I turn off. And now I can actually go ahead and maybe with them some push and pull by hand, try to adjust the stuff by hand. So first I'm going to make a symmetry. So I break the surface there and there. Let's turn on symmetry. Let's turn on this one. And oh, interesting. What's going on here? Oh, it shows also the 3D scan, of course. Don't. And look at this. This is actually quite acceptable for a first try. So I hope that this actually demonstrated to you that when we start with curves, we're not building car bodies. We try to skin something very organic. The curves can be our starting point. They, however, do not have to be our end point. So, for example, here in this case now, I think we got pretty close to our scan. So this part here is way too wide. So for example, now I can select the CVs and I'm selecting the CVs of that surface. You see now I'm sculpting my surface. And then I maybe with control, nope, not control, simply push them a little bit more together. Maybe here a little bit more as well. So I'm losing a little bit of definition, of course. So there you see, it doesn't look, I'm not really excited about the way how that looks right now. So let's see. Yeah, maybe there's no other way to do that. If I want to build this one out of one shell. Why are you? Yeah, okay, good. Never mind what I just said. There, I have to bring those down maybe a little bit more. Okay, and then, for example, all those points you see, I can work with. That's actually the really nice part about this type of sculpting method. Let's show how this one looks. Let's go to top view. Let's turn on this 3D scan. Yeah, so I think we're pretty close, I would say. I could continue further fine-tune the design. For the moment, I actually leave it this way. So maybe Here I'm going to snap to this height, and then I'm going to middle mouse button snap to this point, so this is all at a line again. This point here, you see this part of the foam model sticks out, so if I push this one out a little bit more, I get a little bit of that curvature back. And everybody who is, for example, familiar with polygon modeling, that yes, it is pretty much the same thing. I'm dealing here with like the cage for sub D surface, and I'm just rearranging those points. I'm trying to clean this one up a little bit, see maybe what I can do. The scan turns symmetry off. So the reason why, I can actually look from this part in, let's see, and then see maybe where, for example, the surface I'm creating is intersecting with my design. So here, for example, you can see it sticks out. Oops, wrong key. Yeah, and actually that part is going to be trimmed off soon anyway. So I'm going to leave it that way. Nice highlights. Okay, so let's say as a prototype model, this is really sufficient. And let's hide the control points. Don't really need to see them anymore. Okay, so that was for that part. Now, for example, it's time to take a look at how we actually can generate those cuts at the back and actually the lower part. You can actually see the way that this is actually one cut and then there is another cut. So that's actually a quite complicated shape, and I will simplify this a little bit. And again, I like to repeat this one. Whatever you can do with a knife, sandpaper, and foam is vastly different than what you can do with NURBS. Because NURBS surfaces, if you want not to kill yourself, they have to simplify shapes. So here's kind of like this sharper edge, and for the sake of this exercise, I will make this line here flow into there. So that means I go to this view, and let's call this one profiled and surface. Okay, there. For the moment, let's select all those, turn those points off, and then I'm going to hide them. Okay, so CV degree 5 should be really sufficient. So I'm imagining where this line would go to. So maybe there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Then actually select the CV. And now I can go ahead and start sculpting my shape. And there, see, actually I'm already getting pretty close. Maybe like this. Now, this is actually a curve that has to be somewhere else. So I move this one to here. And now I copy and paste it. And middle mouse button, grid snap. I move it back to where it was. Don't worry, it will make sense in a second. This object. So for example, here I'm going to select those CVs. And then, for example, I move them down. So I try not to touch those, for example. You see the nice, all these points are lined up. So only this part here I adjust. Okay, maybe a little bit higher. Perfect. So the whole point for that was those two lines have a different path. Now what I can do is now try to see how this could work with a skin command. And okay, skin, yep, shift, there. See now, for example, where, for example, the surface is. So you see actually the way how I traced the original first curve is actually not really enough. So what I have to do is I have to position those points a little bit more higher. So here I move them up, and then there you see the surface adjusts accordingly. Now there, leave it. Nope, a little bit higher. Maybe a little bit lower. Okay, great. So the main reason why I did that was simply the surface I can assign to there. And you probably guessed it already correctly. I can start trimming those parts with each other. So I go to intersect. Let's use this method. A spacebar, B spacebar, trim, keep, and keep, and there we are. So you see the curves of my alias model are actually nice and smooth, besides here. And what's going on down there? There's a gap. How did that happen? Okay, let's see. Revert, restart. I want to see. Oh yeah, probably this shell is actually, that's probably it. The shell is not really cutting perfectly through my body. So what I have to do in this case is the points of my lower surface and lower profile has to go up a little bit more. Okay, and then trim, click, click, keep, there. And now we have the pleasure to try to fine-tune stuff. So for example, here you see that is really not a great shape. So maybe this part, what will happen in case I move this one a little bit forwards? Not much. What about this one backwards? See now, this actually becomes rounder. Let's take a look at the side. Blah, that doesn't look, looks terrible. So, nope, that's not what I'm going to do. But obviously it has to go to maybe, yeah. That's a tricky, that's a tough one. simply because of how everything here is constructed. It only can provide me with certain results. So let's see. Let's turn on the scan. So those maybe can go lower a little bit. Let's turn on the sculpting. You see, for example, here it pinches out more than actually I want. So that means maybe this point and this point. What happens if I middle mouse button move it in a little bit more? Oh, there, we're getting closer. And maybe just this one there. This one maybe a little bit out. And a little bit more in. A little bit more in. Yeah. Again, I'm trying to rebuild the surface with a certain set of control points. Only I can, of course, I can only do this to a certain degree because kind of like the amount of points I use to make this polygon model are vastly different than the amount of polygons I have for the NURBS surface. So, and that's really totally valid. It's just the way how it is. So let's go to here. Let's take a look at what we have. So there, for example, of course it breaks because I built in a sharp edge. That's more than normal. I'm actually curious what will happen in case instead of having a flat line like this, I have a nice seashell. So this might actually be a good exercise for something different. So I'm going to select this one, untrim, okay, this is perfect. And then this surface here I delete. Those curve on surface I delete. Okay. And those, wait, symmetry, turn on. Visible. Okay. Okay. So you see actually here I have 1, 2, and then I have 3. So hold on, that actually might have looked confusing. So I'm going to hide those and hide those. So by turning the symmetry on, the far left or far right is being, well, copied over to the far left. So if I go to the skin command, I could say A, Shift B, Shift C. And you see I get actually a complete surface. Next. So now I'm curious, when we take this one and put it onto this, nope. See, that doesn't work. Snap. Now this model actually is only half, and here I'm creating a full part. What do I do? Yeah, I thought I was smart. I wasn't. Well, actually, hold on. I can do it. Let's still give it a try. I don't know if this actually will work. So, skin, 1, shift, and shift. And then this object we move to here. Let's see how everything works with the intersect spacebar. Okay, trim, discard, keep. Yeah, so that makes sense. You see, I only have half of my model, so obviously it cannot perfectly trim, but I'm curious if this maybe could work. No, it did not. So this interactively created model can not actually create that part. So what I'm going to do is here, this one I delete. And in this case, I have to break the usage of my construction history. But that's fine. So I have a symmetry. Click this layer, go to layer, and then say create geometry. Now I do not just have a symmetry, I actually really have two objects. So if I adjust half, the other half of course doesn't mirror it anymore. So just be aware of that. But now in this case, I can actually go ahead and say 1, 2, 3, oops, 1, 2, 3, and then this one to there. Okay. One, spacebar, U and U. See it there, now I have all the intersection curves. Keep. 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 There. See? That, for example, also doesn't look too bad. Of course, now this is not exactly the same harsh cut I had before. So if I would like to have more sharper transition in between, then instead of, for example, using just 3 profiles, I actually might have to use maybe along here 4 profiles. So from here to there to there to there, I skin. So maybe just for last demo, let's give that one a try. So you basically see what I'm talking about. This one we delete. All those curve on surfaces we remove. Okay, this one I simply slightly with the middle mouse button move to the right. And then when I go to skin and say 1, 2, 3, 4. Why did it? Oh no, it did not. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. By the way, I'm going to move this one to a new layer. Copy and paste. Assign symmetry, and then also here I can say create geometry, and it also creates me just the lines. And then skin 1, 2, 3, 4. There, that's the way how it should work. Next. Let's take a look if this, it's not really much sharper. So I'm going to show my 3D scan, and before I continue my other work, I'm actually trying to see what I could do by maybe adjusting now those profile curves. Okay, so there you see actually those sides have to be much higher. So I selected through the model. I also selected the other points, as you can see, and then I pushed them up. And I guess I have to do the same on the other side as well. There, move up. Okay. Now maybe let's show this one to make sure it still runs through my lower body. And it does. Here it looks like I'm going to have some problems. So in this case now, I can go ahead and say, again, intersect one with you and you. Oops, wrong one. Intersect this one, spacebar with those two. Trim, keep, keep, keep. And then actually, now in this mode, I can go ahead and, for example, maybe see what I could do to change this. That didn't really do much. Ah, see, this one actually works better. So here it bevels out, comes out way too high. So maybe there. Let's see what happens if I go to scale. So I'm going to set, where's my pivot point? There. So my pivot point I would like to reset for all those. Alt click to the grid, somewhere there, and then non-proportional scale, middle mouse button. See that, for example, see it pulls that curve down, it flattens everything a little bit. And then maybe with move along the z-axis. And then you can, basically continue sculpting those points. Move those up a little bit. And yeah, see, this already looks not as drastic. That benefit, you see, this one is now nicer and round. I don't have a sharp crease anymore, so that's a little bit of the detail I sacrificed. If I move this one inwards a little bit, and left mouse button, yeah. For example, I could maybe, let's see what happens if I scale those together. Whoa, nope. Oh, those lines don't have their pivot point set. That's the reason why it didn't work. So middle mouse button and Alt. Let's do the same. Middle mouse button. Ooh, interesting result. No, I don't really like this. So you see minor changes there can already have quite an impact. Well, I think I like it the way how it was this way. There. Keep it at this level. Okay. So that was, for example, one approach. I could of course have modeled everything also by half. Then I have this crease, and then I would need it to round this crease later. Could have worked as well. So for example, when I created this one skin and I create the other skin, then actually I round it with the fillet tool, with the detach tool. The fillet I split into half, so I still only have like the rest of my one side skin and part of the fillet, and then with that I would trim half of my model, and then I could, with the symmetry, copy it all over. Those are all different valid ways how to do it. Again, there's very often not really a wrong way or bad way. Some are more efficient, some are less efficient, some create more messy surfaces, some create better surfaces. But for example, this one is a pretty good and close match to, for example, this foam model. Besides, of course, some areas where you can see that actually it does not really perfectly stick represent the design. But if, for example, here we turn the symmetry off and the symmetry off, and here this, no, this part, no, I want to have this part, symmetry, yeah. Invisible, invisible. Oh, what's going on? Hold on, this is odd. Do I have duplicates? Oh, I had symmetry turned on by accident. That was it. There. So for example, now you can see where the surface is actually close to the scan. So on the side it sticks out a little bit. Here, for example, it's a little bit too low. So even with the part trimmed, you don't necessarily want to go back and adjust it. I mean, we could actually, you know what, let's give it a try. This is probably really bad practice. You should never really try to sculpt a mesh that you trimmed, because you can easily deform it, but somehow I must have overlooked this part. And then there, push this one back up, and I think the lower parts, yeah, they didn't really adjust that surface yet. So what I mean with don't sculpt those parts. So let's say here I select this point and I sculpt it. You see I'm changing this curve drastically. Oh, okay, silly me. The trimming is interactive, so of course if I sculpt this part, the trimming will update, so never mind. I thought like the trimming was baked, so actually we're good. Perfect. So that means I could still go ahead and fine-tune my meshes. So my two shells and the surface at the bottom till I get exactly the shape I want. So sorry for the confusion. Okay, that's everything.